Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Glad you could be here. I have a book review for you today that I'm pretty excited about. Before we get to that though, I want to make sure that you stay till the end of the video because I will be talking a little bit about what I'm doing next week. And it's in the same genre, but it was a totally different experience for me, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that toward the end of the video, okay? The book I recently finished was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, popularly known as Blade Runner. This is the book that inspired both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. The ideas that are put forth in this book were what those movies were constructed around. So I won't be talking about the movies today. I have seen both of them. It's been a while. I didn't rewatch them, but needless to say, they are great movies. You do need to check them out if you are a science fiction fan, and also if you're a Harrison Ford fan, because they are really great. The main protagonist in this book is a bounty hunter named Rick Deckard, and that is who Harrison Ford plays in the movies. He is a bounty hunter who hunts down androids. The setting is a post-apocalyptic world after an event called World War Terminus, and it is a world that has been ravaged by nuclear fallout, and some humans in the world have been so severely affected by the fallout that they are labeled as specials. Their minds have been deteriorating, and they can't really totally function as members of society because of the damage that's been done to their minds and to their bodies in general. The regulars, people who have not been harmed yet by the fallout, have mostly gone off-world to Mars to live and create a new community on Mars. There are a few that have stayed behind. Rick Deckard is one of those, and he is hired by the San Francisco Police Department to hunt down a new breed of android that has been created, and they are supposedly living on Earth instead of being on Mars where they are supposed to be. You heard it right. Androids have been banned from Earth. It's not really clearly stated why, but because they are less than human, and that should have been double quotes. They are less than human. They are not allowed to inhabit a once human world and be in the same space as human beings. So there are bounty hunters like Rick Deckard that go out and deactivate the androids, aka kill them. And there is a new breed of android called a Nexus 6, who it is very, very difficult to determine whether they are human or whether they are androids. And the company that has created these new breeds of androids and previous models before them, Rosen Technologies, Rick goes to visit this company as he's told to do so by his superiors at the San Francisco PD, and administer tests to a random assortment of people who may or may not be the Nexus 6 model. They could be human, they may not be. And he has to determine the validity of his test by using a control group before he can actually continue using the test. It's called a Voight-Kampff test, and it supposedly measures empathy in beings that are human and may or may not be human. So that is the basic test of a human versus an android is supposedly humans have empathy, whereas androids do not. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get on into the review. But needless to say, he goes to Rosen Technologies. He starts out using his test on Mr. Rosen's daughter, and comes to find out through a series of events that she is actually an android. And it starts putting him in kind of a moral dilemma, because throughout the course of their interactions, he realizes he can't deactivate her because she's a signature model of the company. She's protected under certain laws of business, and so he can't deactivate her. And the more he gets to know her, he kind of falls in love with her, and it's kind of an interesting interaction that the two of them have. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was a really engrossing story. There's very subtle humor in the book. It felt like there was a comic relief that was intended. You know, he's got all this detail and minute little things that make up his world that he's trying to cue you into. And he wants to kind of take you out of that for a minute and give you something to laugh about. There's little things like Deckard's sheep that he owns is an electric sheep. And I thought, you know, when I first saw the title of this book, I'm like, okay, that's just a weird title. But he actually has an electric sheep. Now, they never really talk about whether androids dream of electric sheep in the book, but I just thought it was kind of funny. Oh, he actually has an electric sheep. And there's other little quirky things. You know, when you get off a boat, you could say that you disembarked the boat. Well, in one scene, they are on an elevator, and they get off the elevator, and Philip K. Dick writes that they disemelevated the elevator. So instead of disembarking, they disemelevated. I was laughing so hard because it's totally not a word, right? So it's little things like that kind of keep you engaged and take you away from all the detail work for a few minutes. But this is a classic cyberpunk story. It's set in a future world that has very old world noir in it. You can imagine a 50s detective movie fused with science and technology. And so it's classic cyberpunk, very, very interesting and unique the way it's done up, classic detective work. And Rick Deckard goes around and he's trying to hunt down the other Nexus 6s that he has found out about in the story. One is a popular opera singer. One is a Russian KGB agent of sorts, supposedly. And at some point he realizes he's going to have to get them before they get him, because they are in turn trying to hunt him down because they know he's after them. So he's part bounty hunter and he's part hunted as well. It's a really cool way to go about the story. And the biggest question that is posed in this book is, what really makes someone human? What does it take for us to go from calling someone an android versus calling them a human? What makes a sentient being alive? Now, when you think a sentient being, these are people who have intellect, they can reason, and think things out intelligently. And an android can do that, right? They've had that built into their programming, into their mechanics. They are able to think like humans do because they've been built with all the possible thoughts of human beings and things like that. They can even exhibit emotion in some circumstances because they've been built with all the things that register as negative and things that would make you angry and things that would make you sad, and to even have artificial tear ducts built in for the times that they need to activate their crying response, things that would make them appear human on the outside. So androids could potentially do all of those things, but as his test is supposed to register, the difference between an android and a human is empathy. Can they feel genuine sorrow and compassion for what another being is going through? Throughout the course of the book, Rick Deckard realizes that he is starting to feel empathy towards the androids, and he realizes that some of these androids can actually exhibit what seems like empathy. And then it begs the moral question, are they alive? And if they are, I'm committing murder by deactivating them. So that's really the central question, and I really feel like it's appropriate to the world that we live in, because we are getting to that point in our technological scheme where androids are starting to become a reality. You know, we've got robots on the market that are doing various different things. There are people that are working towards building a very human-like robot, working on positronic brains and things like that. At some point, we are going to have what at one point was only thought to be fiction, hence the name science fiction. But science fiction is really known for the fact that it presents probabilities versus possibilities. Fantasy is more about possibilities. What if this actually was really a thing? It won't be, but what if it was? Whereas science fiction is more probability. What is going to happen when this does happen? And I think we're seeing that today. So if there was a created being, aka created by another human being, but to be so human-like that you couldn't really tell the difference, and they exhibited all the emotions and things like that, and even empathy, would we call them a living being? He even brought it up at one point in the book. Rick Deckard talks about, do you believe that the androids have a soul and things like that? At what point do we consider them living beings? And then retiring them would be considered murder. So it's a really interesting premise to the book. I was thoroughly engrossed in it. It was really interesting to see as he begins to fall in love with this android woman. They even get to the point of sleeping together and having sexual relations, and he gets to that point where he's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't begin to wrap my mind around what I'm doing when I'm feeling like these entities are actually human. So he really has that moral struggle within him that makes him question everything that he's believed and everything that he's worked for. He even talks about maybe at some point going off-world himself because he just doesn't want to be involved on Earth anymore. And there's a quasi-religion of sorts in the book that toward the end of the book is later debunked by a popular TV show and radio show that everybody watches and listens to. Buster Friendly is his name. But there's a religion in the book called Mercerism that is all based around empathy and having compassion with other beings, and you hook yourself up to this machine and you feel the emotions of others that this religion has supposedly brought everybody together in. It's really, really interesting and unique, but it's very much about taking you out of the idea that the androids that have been created can even have empathy. It's very, very much pushed that humans are the only ones that have this empathy. And then toward the end of the book, when that religion is debunked, they start to realize, well, what's even the point? What are we wrestling against the androids for? So I thoroughly enjoyed this. I can't recommend it enough. I give this book a solid 5 stars. And I'm shocked that I had not read this beforehand. You know, I've seen Blade Runner several times. I've seen the sequel once, but I never read the book, and I'm really glad that I finally did, because there's just something about the book that makes it so much better than the movies, and that's often the case with books. You just can't get an accurate translation to a movie or a TV show. It's always better to read the book. And that's why I always say, read more books, because that's really where it's at. I highly recommend that you pick this up. You will get some really good humor at different points in the book. At one point, he buys a goat because actual living animals are a status symbol in the society that's left over. And if you have an electric animal like he currently does, it makes you seem less than, or maybe you really are a special and you're not deserving of being called a human anymore per se, because you've been reduced to that level. So he's always self-conscious about having this electric sheep. So he takes his bounty money, he goes out and buys a goat, and it's just hilarious. These little elements of humor that seem so out of place, but yet it's a breath of fresh air in the midst of all the detail work and all the data that he's feeding you about this world. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I don't know if you do this, but if you've seen a movie before you read a book, maybe you do this too, where the whole time I was reading the book, I had a picture of Harrison Ford in my mind, because that's how I've always known Rick Deckard to be, is Harrison Ford, right? So I'm reading this book and I'm thinking about Harrison Ford, and I'm thinking, yeah, he was a really good fit for this role. I can definitely see him in this story. So maybe that's just me. It's a quirk of mine. You know, you get somebody fused into your brain if you've seen the movie first. And that's what happened with me. So yeah, pick this book up. Let me know what you think. I highly recommend it. And if you've read the book before, let me know what you think in the comments. What were your thoughts about it? What did you like? What didn't you like? Is this a book that you feel you need to read again now that I've talked about it? If you haven't read the book, does this video make you more intrigued? Do you want to read it now? Have you seen the movies? What were your thoughts on those? Give me all the juicy details, folks. I want to know. So, pick it up. Let me know what you think. In my next video, I am going to be talking about something that I believe is the polar opposite to this book. It is another cyberpunk novel. and I will talk more about that next week. So make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you sign up for notifications. Share with all your friends. And make sure that you're reading more books, folks. I'll talk to you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.